The letter is still in your pocket. You wrote it 3 weeks ago, folded it twice, didn't seal it, because sealing it would mean something you weren't ready to mean. Your wife doesn't know it exists. Your kids don't know you have a job that requires a letter like this. Nobody does. That's the first thing they take from you. Not your name, not your freedom, not your time. They take the ability to be known. And you gave it willingly. You signed the paper. You memorized the coordinates. You showed up. This is the story of what happens after you show up. Not the raids, not the targets, not the classified operations in countries whose names will never appear in this video. This is the story of what it actually costs to become the kind of person governments send when there are no other options. When the diplomats have failed. When the satellites have been watching for months. When someone in a room with no windows decides that the only remaining solution is a man, or a small group of men, who officially don't exist. You are that man. Or you were, or you will be. Or you're watching this because something in you already knows you're built for a world most people will never see. Either way, stay with me, because what I'm about to tell you isn't the version that gets made into movies. It isn't the version politicians reference in speeches. It's the version that lives in the silence between what happened and what can be said about it. The full cost, the full weight, the full truth. As close as language can get to something that was never meant to be spoken. This is Delta. You didn't choose Delta. Delta chose the version of you that hadn't been created yet. That's how it works. There's no application. No recruiter calls, no poster on a base wall that says, "Join the most elite unit in the U.S. military." There's just a slow accumulation of moments where you realize the ceiling above you isn't a ceiling at all. It's a floor. And something is operating above it that you can't see. The first time you heard the name, you were at a FOB somewhere flat and brown. 2 men were talking low near the motor pool. Not whispering, just compressed. The kind of voice people use when the words themselves carry weight that normal volume can't hold. You caught 3 words, maybe 4. They stopped when they saw you. That was it. That was the moment, not a recruitment pitch, not a demonstration of capability. Just 2 men going quiet. And your brain spending the next 6 months trying to reconstruct what they almost said. That's the thing about secrets that are kept well. They don't announce themselves. They leave a shape, an absence, a room temperature silence where information should be. And the human mind, especially a mind like yours, trained to find threats in negative space, cannot leave that silence alone. You started paying attention differently after that night. The sergeant who came back from a deployment and wouldn't say where he'd been. The operator at the range whose weapon modifications didn't match any standard issue configuration you'd ever seen. The way certain men moved through a crowd, not like soldiers, like weather. Present without announcing themselves, gone before you registered the movement. You weren't hunting for Delta, you were just watching. And then one Tuesday, not a special Tuesday, not a Tuesday that felt like anything, there was an envelope in your mailbox, no return address, no letterhead, no name on the outside except yours, written by hand in block letters that told you nothing about who wrote them. Inside, a date, a grid coordinate, a single line of text. If you're interested in the most demanding assignment at the United States military, be at this location at 0500. No signature, no explanation, no promise of what happens if you go, no warning of what happens if you don't. Just coordinates, and the quiet, certain knowledge that you were already going. The room holds 43 men. You count them without meaning to. Habit. Every operator in this room counts things without meaning to. Exits, angles, weight distributions, distances. It's what years of training does to a brain. It stops being a skill and starts being the only way you know how to see. Nobody speaks, not because there's a rule against it, because every man in this room is doing the same internal calculation, and none of them want to show their work. Am I actually good enough for this? That question, that specific question, is the most dangerous thing in the room, not the instructors, not the mountains outside, not the weeks ahead, that question. Because it's the first test, and it started the moment you walked through the door and nobody told you. A man in civilian clothes stands at the front. No rank, no name, just a quality of stillness that tells you he's been somewhere you haven't been yet. He speaks for 4 minutes, maybe 5. When he's done, the only thing you know for certain is this: most of you will not finish. The ones who don't finish will not be told why. The ones who do finish will not be told why either. There are no rules posted on the wall. That is the rule. Day 1 is land navigation, alone. A ruck on your back that starts at 40 pounds and will not stay there. Point A to point B, across terrain that wants to break your ankles in the dark. No time limit given, just move, you move. Day 4 is more of the same. Except your feet have already started the conversation they'll be having with you for the rest of your life. A negotiation between what the body can do and what you're asking it to do. You stop listening to the body. The body is a liar at mile 12. The body has been lying since mile 8, day 11. The long walk begins. 40 miles, 65 pounds, mountains. No time limit, just finish. Or don't. Here's what nobody tells you about the long walk. The physical suffering peaks around hour 10 and then plateaus. Your feet stop sending useful information. Your legs stop being legs and become something more mechanical. Pistons, not muscles. The pain stops being sharp and becomes ambient. Background noise. What doesn't plateau is the negotiation. The internal argument between the part of you that has a reason to stop and the part of you that doesn't have a language for continuing, it just continues. Mile 31, mile 36, mile 38. The body always quits last. The mind quits first. Delta selects for the gap between them. You finish. You don't remember the last 2 miles. Your body moved through them on something older than thought. Some pre-language instruction written into the part of you that existed before you had a name. You look at your watch, your name is on the list, and for the first time since you arrived, the question changes. Not am I good enough, but good enough for what exactly? You're about to find out. You thought you knew how to shoot. Every operator who walks into OTC thinks the same thing. Every single one of them is wrong in the same way, not about the mechanics, but about what shooting actually is at this level. Mechanics are the entry requirement. What Delta builds is something else entirely. Think of it like this. A classically trained musician can read any piece of sheet music placed in front of them. They can reproduce it perfectly. Tempo, dynamics, every note in sequence. That's a conventional operator, technically excellent, predictable in the best possible way. A jazz musician has internalized the theory so completely that the theory disappears. What's left is pure response. Someone changes the key mid-phrase, they follow. The drummer drops a beat. They absorb it and keep the structure alive. The song falls apart. They rebuild it in real time from whatever pieces are still usable. Delta trains jazz musicians. 6 months, more rounds downrange than most soldiers fire across an entire career. The killing house, a structure that gets reconfigured overnight so that no evolution is ever identical to the last. You clear it in daylight. You clear it in darkness. You clear it with smoke. with noise. With your heart rate at 180 and a flashbang going off close enough to feel the pressure change in your chest. You learn to make the decision in the fraction of a second before the decision is needed. Threat, no threat, shoot, don't shoot. The wrong answer costs a hostage, costs a teammate. There is no second iteration of a missed shot in the real world, so there are no missed shots here. Then comes tradecraft, the other half of what you're becoming. One morning, they drive you to a city and give you a name that isn't yours. A backstory with enough texture to survive casual conversation. A task that requires you to move through civilian space without being the thing you actually are. You sit in a cafe, order coffee in a language you've been studying for 4 months. The man across from you doesn't know what you are. The woman at the next table doesn't know. The street outside is full of people who will never know. You watch everything. You react to nothing. And somewhere between the second cup of coffee and the moment you complete the task and walk back into the street like someone who was never there, you realize what they've been building. Not a soldier who can fight, a ghost who can think. The difference sounds small. It isn't. The sign outside says something administrative. Facilities management, something with an acronym. The kind of sign designed to be read once and immediately forgotten. The buildings behind the fence look like they've been forgotten too. Utilitarian, unremarkable, the architectural equivalent of background noise. Inside is something else entirely. 3 days after you arrive, there's a debrief, a raid that happened 48 hours ago. 12 men in a room, including the squadron commander. 23 years of service. More combat deployments than most generals will ever see. A man whose career exists in the kind of classified archives that don't get declassified in his lifetime. The newest operator in the room raises his hand. He's been at Delta for 6 weeks. He points out a sequencing error in the breach approach. Not a catastrophic error. The mission succeeded, but a gap in the logic. A place where the plan assumed something it shouldn't have assumed. The commander looks at the diagram for 4 seconds. Then he picks up a marker and rewrites the sequence. No discussion, no defensiveness, no reference to the difference in rank or experience between the man who identified the problem and the man who just corrected his own plan. Just, you're right, here's the fix. In every other military structure on Earth, that exchange ends a career. Here it's so unremarkable that nobody writes it down. That is the culture, not the beards, not the civilian clothes, not the equipment budget that seems to have no visible ceiling. Those are symptoms. The culture itself is simpler and harder to manufacture than any of those things. What matters is whether you can do the job when it matters. Everything else, rank, tenure, reputation, the weight of accumulated commendations, is noise. Useful noise in other contexts. Here it's just noise. You've spent your entire career in institutions that measured you by what you'd done. This is the first place that only measures what you can do. The difference is quiet. It takes about a week to fully feel it. And then you understand why people who make it here almost never leave voluntarily. The compound gives you everything. The question nobody asks out loud is what it takes in return. The first thing you notice is the smell. Not gunpowder, not dust. Something older than both. The specific combination of heat and anxiety and cheap fuel that exists in every conflict zone regardless of continent or decade. Your brain files it immediately, assigns it a category. This is what operational smells like. Every raid after this one will carry some version of this smell, and every time it hits you, your body will already be moving before your mind catches up. The target is mid-level. Nobody who makes headlines. A name in an intelligence file. connected to names and other intelligence files, connected, eventually through 4 or 5 degrees of separation, to the kind of damage that changes things. He has information. The information has value. He comes back breathing. Those are the parameters. Everything else is execution. The approach takes 20 minutes, feels like 4. The compound materializes through night vision the way all targets do. Flat green geometry. Walls and angles. The specific stillness of a place where people are sleeping without knowing they shouldn't be. Then movement. Then you're through the gate, and the training takes the wheel. This is the thing nobody outside the community understands about high-level operators. The goal of all that repetition, all those thousands of rounds, all those killing house evolutions, is to shrink the gap between perception and response to something close to 0. You don't decide to move, you move. You don't decide to engage, you engage. The decision happened 6 months ago in a building at Fort Bragg, and your body has been holding it ever since, waiting for the moment to spend it. First room, second room, third. Target acquired, hands up, flex cuffs, hood, alive, as ordered. 11 minutes total. On the flight back, you look at your hands. Steady, both of them, heart rate already dropping toward baseline. Outside the window, the desert is exactly as indifferent as it was before you landed in it. You just killed 2 men, maybe 3. The count is genuinely unclear, and that unclarity doesn't bother you the way you thought it would. Is that wrong? Here's what you'll learn slowly, over the months that follow. It isn't wrong. It's the correct response to correct training applied to a correct situation. The feelings come later. Not guilt, something more complicated than guilt, something that doesn't have a clean name in any language. But that's later. Right now. 3 weeks after this night, you'll read an intelligence report. A chain of events that started in that compound. Your name is on nothing in that report. The results exist. You just can't sign them. Somewhere around the 4th deployment, you stop counting missions. Not because there are too many to count, because counting implies that each one is a discrete event. Something with edges, a before and after, a weight that sits separately from the others. That's not what it becomes. What it becomes is weather. Continuous, ambient. The operational tempo in a hot period runs 3, sometimes 4 targets a night. You plan, you brief, you execute, you debrief. You sleep for 4 hours in whatever horizontal space is available. You do it again. The adrenaline doesn't disappear. It changes address. It stops living in the acute moments, the breach, the first room, the contact, and starts living in the baseline. Your nervous system recalibrates around a new definition of normal. Danger isn't the exception anymore. Danger is the weather, and you're very good at operating in bad weather. At some point, the adrenaline stops spiking, not because the danger is gone, because danger became the baseline. This is what the outside world never understands about sustained high-tempo operations. It isn't the individual moments that change you. It's the accumulation, the slow replacement of your previous definition of reality with this one. Then comes a hostage rescue. The parameters are different. Capture or eliminate becomes every hostage lives, every captor doesn't. 0 margin, the window measured in seconds. The consequence of failure broadcast on television within hours. You've done several of these by now. What you remember most isn't the breach, isn't the clearance, isn't the technical execution of a near-perfect operation under conditions designed to produce failure. What you remember is the sound. When the blindfold comes off and the hostage understands, not intellectually but in the body, in the chest, in some animal part of the brain that has been waiting for this information for months, there's a sound. Not words, not crying exactly. Something that exists before language. something that the body makes when it receives news it had stopped believing would ever arrive. You have never heard anything like it anywhere else. You keep that sound in a drawer somewhere internal, next to the letter you haven't sealed, next to the names of the men you've lost. Some things don't need to be classified to be kept secret. Then comes a mission that feels different from the first briefing. You don't know why yet. You will. The briefing room is quieter than usual. Not silent. There's the standard operational noise, the shuffle of intelligence packets, the low mechanical hum of systems that are always running. But the quality of attention in the room is different, denser, the kind of focused stillness that only exists when everyone present understands that what's being discussed has weight that most rooms will never hold. The name on the briefing is one you've seen before. Everyone has seen this name before. 1 month of preparation. A full-scale replica of the target compound constructed at a location you'll never reference by name. You walk through it so many times that the floor plan stops being information and becomes instinct. The same way the killing house became instinct. The same way your weapon became instinct. Your body learns the geometry of a building that exists 4,000 miles away. Every contingency rehearsed, every failure mode anticipated. What if the intelligence is wrong? What if there are more personnel than expected? What if someone makes a decision that falls outside the plan? The answer to all three questions is the same. You adapt. You've been training for adaptation since the first day of selection. The plan is not the mission. The plan is the scaffolding you build so that when it collapses, and it will always collapse in some way, you have something to push off from. The flight is 90 minutes over airspace that will deny any knowledge of your presence. Stealth helicopters that don't appear in any official inventory. Low altitude. Radio silence. The darkness outside the window is absolute, and you have never in your life felt this specific quality of focus. Every deployment, every evolution, every round fired in that killing house existing simultaneously in this moment, pointing at this night. Then the helicopter goes down. Not enemy action, mechanical failure. The tail rotor clips a wall in the darkness and the aircraft rotates and impacts inside the compound perimeter and the plan. The plan you have rehearsed 100 times in a replica building in a classified location is dead before the dust settles. 3 seconds of absolute silence inside your own skull. Then you move, because that's what the gap is for. The gap between when the plan dies and when you act. Delta lives in that gap. Delta was built for that gap. Every selection evolution, every stress phase, every long walk in the rain was building the capacity to function inside those 3 seconds without flinching. You assault anyway, room by room, floor by floor, 3rd floor, last room, he's there, older than the photographs, reaching for something he will not reach. 1 word on the radio. Jackpot, then silence. Complete and total. The held breath of everyone who has been waiting. In this building, in another building, in a room with no windows where the most powerful person in the world is watching a screen. All of it releasing at once. Someone makes a joke on the flight home. It's the worst joke you've ever heard. You laugh until you can't breathe. There's a Sunday morning about 2 years after you come home. Not a dramatic morning. No trigger, no flashback, no cinematic moment of crisis. Just breakfast. Your daughter is laughing at something on the other side of the table. A joke her brother made. Something small and irrelevant and perfect. And the sound of her laughing is the best sound in the world. And you know that. You know it completely. And yet some part of your brain is not in this kitchen. It's in a doorway somewhere. It's running a threat assessment on the backyard. It's cataloging exit routes from a house you've lived in for 3 years. You smile at your daughter. She doesn't know you're not entirely there. That's the cost nobody puts in the briefing. The marriage ends quietly, not in a single moment, but in the accumulation of moments where you were physically present and operationally absent. She didn't fall out of love with you. She fell out of love with the version of you that was available to be loved. The man who came back from each deployment was recognizable but slightly different, the way a photograph fades. Same image, less light. You don't blame her. You couldn't explain then, you still can't. You try therapy once. The therapist is good at her job. You can tell within 10 minutes the quality of her questions, the patience in the space she leaves after them. She wants to help you. She has the tools to help someone. What she doesn't have is access to the material, because the material is classified, and classified doesn't stop being classified because you're sitting in a civilian office trying to locate the source of something that wakes you at 3 in the morning. She asks about your service. I can't say. She asks about specific incidents. Classified. She asks where the weight is coming from. You look at her for a moment. She's waiting, genuinely waiting. I did things I can't tell you about, you say, in places I can't name, and I'd do them again. And I don't know what to do with all 3 of those things being true at the same time. She writes something down. You never go back, not because she failed, because the conversation has a ceiling built into it that no amount of skill can remove. The VA has a form for everything. There is no form for this. No box that says, I did the right things in the wrong world, and I'm not sure how to live in the right world anymore. The brotherhood is what holds the structure together. Not therapy, not recognition, not the flag that gets folded at funerals into a triangle and handed to families who will never know what it actually represents. The men who were there. At a teammate's funeral, you stand beside someone you haven't seen in 14 months. You don't speak. The service runs 2 hours. His shoulder touches yours for most of it. That contact, that specific, wordless, unannounced contact, carries more information than any conversation you've had in years. He knows you know. That's enough. You're sitting in a quiet room, same room as the beginning, same hands. Same letter in your pocket, still folded twice, still unsealed. Except now you've lived everything that exists between that first envelope in your mailbox and this moment, and the question the opening of this story asked has shifted into something you didn't expect. Not, was it worth it? That's the wrong question. That question assumes a clean ledger, costs on one side, returns on the other, a bottom line you can read and evaluate. There is no clean ledger. There's only the life you lived and the life you didn't live, and the complete impossibility of knowing which one was real. The right question is simpler and heavier. Would you make the same choice again? And the answer, the honest answer, the one that lives in the part of you that doesn't perform for anyone, is yes, without hesitation, which is perhaps the heaviest thing you carry. Not regret, the absence of regret, the knowledge that given identical information, identical circumstances, identical everything, you walk back through that door every single time. Your daughter finds the letter 20 years from now. You don't know this yet, but she will. In a drawer, beneath things that accumulated on top of it, the way years accumulate on top of everything. She'll unfold it carefully. Read it twice. Sit with it for a long time in a quiet room not unlike this one. She'll understand, or she won't. Either way, she'll know something true about who you were, something that couldn't have been communicated any other way, through any other medium, in any other form except this. A letter written by someone who wasn't sure they were coming home. to someone they loved more than the mission, folded twice and never sealed. You were the answer to a question the world didn't know it was asking. Somewhere right now, a man is standing in front of an envelope with no return address. Grid coordinates, one line of text. His hands are steady. His mind is already made up. He doesn't know yet what it costs. He'll learn the same way you learned, not all at once, but continuously, over years, in quiet rooms and loud doorways, and every space in between. The work continues. It always continues. You were never on any map, but you were everywhere that mattered.